My name is Vanessa Harper, and at 31, I thought I had finally created something close to a dream life, at least the version of it I could afford in New York City. A sunlit studio in Brooklyn, hardwood floors worn just right, tall windows that caught the morning light, and a corner desk where I could sketch whimsical worlds for the children's books I illustrated. It wasn't big, it wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. And for a while, it felt like ours. My boyfriend Alex moved in 8 months ago, after his sublease ended, and his indie documentary project in Vermont wrapped up. At first, it was supposed to be temporary. He said it with a half smile, brushing the hair behind my ear as he kissed my temple. Just until I land this next gig, babe. Then we'll find a place with a little more space, together. I believed him, because when you love someone, you believe the small things. You believe that quiet promises whispered between dishes and Netflix episodes are going to mean something tomorrow. The studio was cramped, sure, but we made it work. He took calls in the hallway when I was on deadline. I cleared a shelf for his camera gear. We joked about whose turn it was to clean the espresso machine. We were building something. Until one Tuesday afternoon, that something cracked. I had just come back from a meeting with my editor, buzzed from coffee and good news. A new book deal. Illustrations due in 8 weeks. I wanted to celebrate. I even stopped to grab a pint of mint chocolate chip on the way home. But when I opened the door to the studio, there she was, sitting cross-legged on my daybed, shoes off, socks mismatched, painting her nails a blinding neon green. Jessica, Alex's younger sister, 25, jobless by choice, and floating from couch to couch ever since her last startup burned her out. We'd met a few times. She was a lot. "Vanessa!" she said like we were old friends, arms out wide. "I'm crashing here for a while. Isn't it great?" Behind her, Alex stood sheepishly, scratching the back of his neck. "It's just temporary," he added quickly. "Jess needs a place to stay, just until she figures stuff out." I looked from him to her, my hand still gripping the ice cream bag. "Alex, we didn't talk about this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. His expression shifted, defensive now. "She's family, Ness. She's going through a lot. I thought you'd understand." Understand. Of course, the magic word people use when they want you to bend. I plastered on a smile I didn't feel, walked to the freezer, and placed the ice cream inside. It was already starting to melt. I nodded slowly, like maybe if I was calm enough, reasonable enough, they'd see what they were doing, but they didn't. Because that's the thing about people who take from you without asking. They don't see it as taking, they see it as their right. And that was the moment, though I didn't know it yet, when the studio stopped feeling like a home. It became a holding cell. I didn't slam any doors that day, I didn't scream or cry. But something inside me went quiet. And in that silence, something else began to grow. Jessica settled into my studio like it was a long-awaited inheritance. By the end of her first week, she'd already claimed the daybed as her personal throne, scattered her tote bags across the floor like landmines, and monopolized the bathroom mirror with skincare products I didn't even know existed. She wasn't just visiting, she was colonizing. And Alex? He tiptoed around the mess, both physical and emotional, like it wasn't his problem to solve. "I told her it's temporary," he said when I finally brought it up over dinner one night. We were eating takeout on the floor because she'd turned the dining table into her vision board workspace. She just needs a couple of weeks to get her head on straight. Then a couple of weeks turned into 3, then 5. Every day I came home to new intrusions. Jessica had rearranged the books on my shelf, alphabetized them by cover color because it's more soothing to the eye. She started using my art supplies, borrowing my stylus pens, even doodled over a draft page I'd left on my desk with the caption, "This bunny should be sassier, you're welcome." I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because part of me was still hoping Alex would see it, that he'd look up from his camera edits or his sister's sob story and say, "Wait, this isn't fair to Vanessa." But he never did. Instead, I got a kiss on the forehead and a soft, tired voice saying, "She's just going through it, babe. She'll be gone soon." And I believed that. I wanted to believe that. Until the morning she took a phone call on speaker while I was in the middle of a Zoom call with my publisher. She was arguing with her ex, loudly, while pacing in front of my camera, wearing my robe. I ended the call early, humiliated, and walked into the kitchen to find her eating cereal out of my favorite bowl. No apology, not even a glance. Just, "You were on a call? Thought you were just FaceTiming a friend." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake next to Alex, listening to the ceiling fan creak, wondering if I was being dramatic. Was I too rigid, too protective of my space? But the truth kept knocking inside my chest like a warning drum. This isn't about space. This is about respect. And I was losing both. So I started doing what I do best: planning. I didn't scream, I didn't threaten. I simply opened a new sketchbook. And on the first page, I wrote in pencil, "What does freedom look like?" I began looking at listings the next morning. Nothing big, nothing fancy, just a space that was mine and mine alone. No daybeds commandeered, applauded, no passive-aggressive post-its. No more, "You'll adjust" smiles, just quiet and light and ownership. I didn't tell Alex, not yet. He wouldn't understand. Not while he was stuck in the story that Jessica was the victim and I was just being uptight. Instead, I told him I'd picked up a new commission that might require more hours, maybe a few late nights at the office. He kissed my hand and smiled. "Proud of you, babe." And just like that, I claimed my time back. 3 nights a week, I used the excuse of late deadlines to take the train to a small studio I'd found across the bridge in Greenpoint. The lease was modest, the floors creaked, and the paint was chipped, but it was mine, and it didn't come with someone else's chaos. At first, I brought only what I needed: my tablet, my sketchbook, a roll of tape, some tea. Then came the books, my mug, my favorite plant. Each item that moved from ours to mine felt like another piece of myself returning home. I hadn't left yet. Not officially, not emotionally, but I was getting ready. Because sometimes leaving isn't one grand gesture. It's quiet, deliberate, strategic, 1,000 tiny steps away. Before one day, you stop looking back. By the time Jessica had been living with us for nearly 2 months, she'd begun to act like I was the guest. My studio, once a quiet haven filled with soft music, morning sun, and watercolor brushes, had become her personal romper room. She talked on speakerphone at all hours, left half-eaten smoothies on my shelves, and piled her laundry in the corner, next to my paint rack no less. Alex, as always, excused it with a soft shrug. "She's in a tough spot, Ness. You know how it is. Post-breakup, no job, no savings. And no boundaries," I said one night, voice low but tense. He blinked. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is." That was the moment something inside me snapped, not in rage, but in clarity. No matter how small I tried to make myself, it would never be small enough. No matter how much I bent, they'd always expect me to bend more. I was being erased in my own home. One Thursday evening, I returned from my secret studio to find Jessica hosting 2 of her friends in the apartment. I say friends because I recognized them from one of her countless rants about how toxic they were. Apparently, being toxic was forgivable if you had wine and gossip. They were lounging on the sofa, feet up, wearing my throw blanket, sipping from my wine glasses. When I entered, Jessica greeted me like I was the doorman. "Oh, hey, V, could you grab us some ice? We're running low." I looked at her, really looked, smug, entitled, so sure I'd say yes. And then at Alex, who was sitting in the armchair beside them, my armchair, laughing at something one of the girls had said. He caught my eye and gave me that smile, the one that says, "Just play along, don't ruin the mood." I didn't say anything. I turned around, and I walked into the kitchen, not for ice, but for my laptop. I opened my email and finalized what I'd been holding back for days. The move-in date for the new studio, confirmed. Deposit, transferred. Key pickup, scheduled. I was done. Over the next week, I packed in silence. Every time Alex or Jessica weren't home, I made trips across the bridge with carefully stacked boxes in the back seat of a borrowed car. Books, supplies, framed prints, a copy of the very first book I ever illustrated. Each trip felt like exhaling. At night, I still came home to the studio, still slept in the same bed, still pretended like we were a unit. But inside, I was already gone, Then came the final straw, served with a side of cheap frosting. Alex's birthday was approaching. I had planned a quiet dinner, just the two of us. A reservation at the sushi spot he loved, the one with the candlelit patio and jazz trio. But Jessica had other plans. 3 days before, she sent out a mass text. "Surprise party for Alex at the studio. Bring drinks, no gifts, just vibes." She didn't ask, didn't even mention it to me. Alex laughed it off when I confronted him. She just wants to do something nice. You know her style, impulsive but well-meaning. Well-meaning doesn't mean boundaryless, I snapped. He tilted his head. Why are you making everything so tense lately? It's just a party, Ness. It'll be fun. But it wasn't going to be fun. Because what he didn't know was that I had a gift of my own. A surprise. A statement. A line in the sand. The night of the party, as people filled my space with laughter and music and tacky balloons, I stood in the bedroom for a long time, staring at the small white box on my desk. Inside, a set of keys, a printed copy of the lease, and a hand-drawn map of the new studio, inked in soft gold lines. It was meant to be a private gift, a gentle invitation to start over, a reset. But now it felt like a flag I was ready to plant. And when the cake came out and Jessica yelled, "Speech, speech," shoving a drink into my hand and wrapping her arm around Alex like she was the partner in this relationship, I knew exactly what I had to do. The lights were dimmed, the cake was glowing. Everyone was gathered around Alex, chanting, "Speech, speech," while Jessica beamed beside him like the co-host of a reality show. I stood quietly at the back of the room, fingers brushing the edge of the small white box in my purse, the same purse I'd been carrying for weeks. To my new studio, to work meetings, to grocery runs, always holding this moment. Alex grinned and clinked his glass. "Thanks, everyone. Seriously, this means a lot. I had no idea this was happening. Jess, you're the best. And of course, my incredible girlfriend, Vanessa. I know I'm a lot sometimes, but you always keep things running, even when I forget to do my part." There was a round of polite laughter. He turned to me and said it. That line. "You always adjust, babe. It's one of the things I admire about you." The word hit me like ice. Adjust. Not love, not respect, not partnership, just adaptability. I stepped forward, my pulse surprisingly steady. "Actually," I said, voice calm but clear, "since everyone's here, I'd like to give Alex my birthday present now." The room quieted, expecting something sweet, sentimental, a love letter. Instead, I pulled the small white box from my purse and placed it in his hands. "Open it," I said. He smiled uncertainly and lifted the lid. Inside, keys, a folded lease, and a sketch. "What is this?" he asked, half laughing. "Is this a prank?" "No, Alex, that's a lease agreement for my new studio, a real one, across the river. No Jessica, no chaos. Just me and peace." He blinked, confused, then tried to laugh again. "But, wait, what? You're moving?" I nodded. "Not tomorrow, not someday. I already have. 3 nights a week for the past month. While you two were debating the best way to arrange my bookshelves or my kitchen drawers, I was building something for myself." Jessica snorted from the couch. "Oh, come on. You're just mad because I ate your stupid yogurt or whatever." I turned to her, finally, with a gaze that didn't flinch. "No, Jessica. I'm mad because I invited someone into my home and got steamrolled. I'm mad because my boyfriend didn't defend me when his sister redrew the map of our lives with a Sharpie. And I'm done adjusting." Alex stepped forward, voice low. "Vanessa, this is not the time. There are people here. This is embarrassing." "And yet," I said, "you had no issue letting your sister host a party in my home without asking. So if you can make public decisions, I can make public declarations." I turned to the crowd. half curious, half horrified. "This apartment was once my studio," I said. "Then it became our apartment, then it became her playground, and now I'm reclaiming it by walking away." Jessica rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said softly. "I'm being done." I picked up my coat and turned to Alex one last time. "I loved you. I gave this relationship my whole heart, but you loved convenience more than commitment. That's not something I can keep adjusting to." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "I'm not slamming the door, I'm just locking it behind me. For now." And then I walked out of the apartment, out of the noise, out of the version of me who kept sacrificing peace for someone else's comfort. That night, the sky was misty. The air smelled like possibility. When I stepped into my new studio, I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I breathed deep, whole, real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like me again. The first morning in my new studio was quiet in a way I hadn't realized I needed. No slamming cabinet doors. No Jessica pacing barefoot while gossiping on speakerphone. No Alex muttering, "Babe, have you seen my phone charger?" while I was deep in deadline mode. Just the sound of light wind tapping the window and the soft bubbling of my old French press as it came back to life. I wrapped myself in a chunky knit sweater, brewed my coffee, and stood at the window, looking out at the courtyard below. It wasn't much. Just a cracked cement patio with some stubborn ivy and a single folding chair someone left behind. But it was mine now, a patch of quiet earth beneath a wide open sky. And the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Over the next few weeks, I settled into something new. I turned the secondhand dresser into a supply cabinet. I rolled out a cheap but charming rug that made the hardwood feel warmer. I bought fresh flowers every Saturday from the Korean grocer down the street and placed them on my desk next to my favorite mechanical pencil. But more than anything, I began to draw again. Not just for deadlines, not for clients, for me. Little by little, lines flowed from my hand with a looseness I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Whimsical hedgehogs riding scooters, book-loving turtles with oversized glasses, a sleepy giraffe curled up in an oversized armchair. I shared one of them online on a whim with a short caption, "First sketch in my new creative cave, just me and a very tired giraffe." The comments came in fast. People loved it. They asked for prints, stickers, more. By the end of that first week, I had opened an online shop. By the end of the second, I had over 3,000 new followers. It wasn't just about the art. It was the energy behind it. People felt it. One DM stood out. A mother in Oregon wrote, "Your drawings give me the same feeling I had when I read books as a kid. Safe, silly, and a little bit magical. Thank you." I teared up reading that, because somewhere between Jessica's hijacked daybed and Alex's shrugging apologies, I had forgotten that this was who I really was. Someone who created safe spaces in pictures in people's hearts, but had failed to create one for herself. Until now. Alex didn't reach out that first week. He probably thought I was bluffing, that I'd return after a few days of cooling off. But by week 2, the texts started. "Hey, can we talk? I didn't expect you to actually leave. Jess is gone. She left 2 days after you did. It's quiet now. Too quiet." I didn't answer. Not yet. Because I needed space to remember what it felt like to be a full person again, not a convenient half. By week 3, he left a voicemail. I cleaned the studio, took down her stuff. "It's back to how it used to be. Or at least I tried. I found one of your old sketches behind the bookshelf. That sleepy raccoon with the coffee cup. I miss you, Ness. Not just the person who made my life easier. You. All of you." There was a pause before he said, "If you ever want to talk, I'll be here." I replayed that message 3 times, not because I missed him, but because I needed to know if the person I missed still existed, the version of Alex who listened, who stood beside me, not just behind me, but I didn't reply. Not yet. Some chapters don't end with slamming doors. They end with slow healing, with quiet boundaries, and with the courage to see what blooms in solitude. It was a Friday afternoon when Alex finally showed up, not with a grand gesture or a dozen apologies, just standing outside my studio door, holding two coffees and looking like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. I saw him through the curtain and considered pretending I wasn't home. But something in his expression, not desperate, not performative, just tired, made me open the door. "Hey," he said softly, holding out a cup. "Still like vanilla oat milk lattes?" I nodded and stepped aside, letting him in, not as a boyfriend, but as someone who used to be one. He walked slowly around the space, taking in the soft lighting, the half-finished sketch of a dancing squirrel on my desk, the wall calendar full of deadlines and colorful sticky notes. "This place feels like you," he said finally. "It is me," I replied. He sat on the small sofa across from my drafting table and wrapped his hands around the coffee cup like he needed the warmth. "I've been thinking about what you said that night," he began, "about how you kept adjusting and I kept expecting it." I didn't say anything. I just listened. I didn't realize how much I relied on your patience as an excuse. I thought, Vanessa's chill, she can handle this. But the truth is, I stopped checking if you should have to. I finally spoke. "I told you, many times. You just didn't listen." "I know," he said, shame settling in his shoulders. "And Jess, I should have set boundaries a long time ago. She left, by the way, about 48 hours after you did. Claimed the vibe was off and moved in with some friends from her pottery class." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how predictable it was. "She was never the real issue," I said. "You were." He nodded, slowly. "I let her disrespect you in your own space. I let her treat your work like it was a hobby, and your peace like it was optional. And I didn't protect the one thing I say I value most, us." His voice cracked a little. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt distant, like the version of me who had needed his validation was a stranger now. "I'm not here to beg," he continued. "I'm here to ask if you think there's still something left to rebuild, but only if it's on new terms, and only if you believe I can be different." I sipped my coffee, buying time. Finally, I said, "What do you think being different looks like?" He didn't hesitate. "Listening when you speak, not just hearing. Listening. Protecting your space like it's mine. Not letting other people rewrite our life because I'm too lazy to confront them. And actually showing up. Not when it's convenient, but when it matters." I nodded. "And the studio?" I asked. "The one we used to share?" He shook his head. "That was never mine. I just didn't realize it until it was too late." We sat in silence for a moment. "I'm not asking to move in," he added quickly. "I'm asking if you'd ever consider letting me take you out. Just dinner. No expectations, just getting to know the version of you I never really deserved." That stopped me, because it was the first time he didn't assume we were okay. He saw the distance. He respected it. I stood, walked to my desk, and grabbed a Post-it. I wrote down a date and time, a local restaurant I loved, casual, no pressure, then handed it to him. "One dinner," I said. "No promises, no assumptions." He smiled, a tired, grateful kind of smile, and held the note like it was gold. "I'll be there," he said. As he left, I stood in the doorway, watching him disappear into the late afternoon light. I didn't feel like the girl he once lived with. I felt like a woman who had rebuilt herself from silence, sketch by sketch. And if he wanted a second chance, he would have to meet me at my level, or not at all. I arrived at the restaurant 5 minutes early. Not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to sit at the corner table by the window, the one with the soft light and a view of the small alleyway garden outside. It was one of my favorite spots in the city, tucked away behind a bookstore and filled with mismatched chairs and worn wooden tables. Nothing about it screamed romantic. That was the point. This dinner wasn't about us. It was about me, seeing if the version of Alex I once believed in still existed. He arrived right on time, surprisingly. No last-minute texts saying he was caught in traffic or needed 5 more minutes to wrap up something. That used to be his default. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look calm." I smiled, sipping my sparkling water. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week. He laughed softly, then got serious. "I'm glad you came." We ordered light, shared a flatbread and salad, nothing fancy. Conversation started awkwardly, but not hostile, just cautious, like two people stepping into a place where the rules had changed. "I checked out your new sketches," Alex said at one point, tapping his phone. "That hedgehog on the skateboard? Genius. I saw it reposted on some kid's book design forum." My brows lifted. "You're following Illustrator forums now?" He chuckled, "Trying to understand the parts of your world I ignored before." It was a small thing, but it landed. Not a performance. Not a compliment for points. Just effort. We talked about work, books, the documentary he was editing. He asked thoughtful questions, not just to fill space, but to hear the answers. Halfway through, I caught myself smiling. Not because I was swooning, but because I was watching someone try. And that was new. Near the end of the meal, he leaned back and said something I wasn't expecting. "I've been going to therapy." I blinked. "Really?" He nodded. "Twice a week, mostly individual sessions. Trying to figure out why I always default to avoiding conflict, even when it hurts the people I care about." I stayed quiet, letting that sink in. "I realized," he continued, "that I was taught from a young age to keep the peace at any cost, especially with Jess. She always had drama, always needed rescuing, and I just played that role without thinking." "And with me?" I asked. He looked down. "With you, I assumed you didn't need rescuing. You were capable, self-sufficient. So I made you carry the weight of every compromise because you never yelled, never gave ultimatums." He looked up at me. "But just because someone doesn't scream doesn't mean they're okay." That line, it hit me in a place I didn't know was still sore. "I don't want to be someone who needs rescuing," I said quietly. "But I do deserve someone who notices when I'm drowning." He nodded. "I see that now, and I hate that it took losing you to realize it." The air between us softened. "I'm not asking to move back in," he added. "I'm asking if we can start again. Slowly, intentionally, on your terms." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked him something unexpected. "Do you remember the Sunday mornings we used to spend on the fire escape?" He smiled, "With coffee and those terrible instant pancakes." "They weren't terrible," I said, grinning. "You just burned them." We both laughed, for real this time. And in that moment, it wasn't about going back. It was about remembering the pieces that were good and asking if they could still fit into who we'd become. When we stood to leave, he offered to walk me home. I declined. "I think I'd rather walk alone tonight," I said gently, "just to let things settle." He nodded, not hurt, just understanding. As I walked back to my studio under the city lights, I felt whole. Not because we were on again, but because I had the choice. And that was something I hadn't felt in a long time. 2 weeks passed after that dinner. We didn't fall back into old habits. No late-night texts, no casual, "Hey, I'm in the neighborhood" pop-ins. Instead, I got exactly what I asked for, space. But within that space, Alex showed up, just not in the way he used to. On a quiet Thursday morning, I got an email. Subject: "For your squirrels and hedgehogs." It was a screenshot of a limited edition artist grant he'd found, specifically for independent illustrators working on children's content. "Thought of you immediately," his message read. "Deadline's tight, but if anyone can pull it off, it's you. No guilt trip, no expectation, just support." I applied. 3 days later, another surprise. A message from my former editor at a major publishing house. She'd seen my latest work on social media, work that had grown since I'd moved into the new studio, and asked if I'd be interested in developing a standalone book series. The timing was almost poetic. I wanted to call someone, not for validation, just to share the joy. And strangely, I thought of Alex, but I didn't call. Not yet. I needed to be sure that I was still choosing myself first. That joy didn't need a witness to be real. Instead, I sent a message. Your squirrel grant idea worked. Something big just came through. I'll tell you more next time we talk. He replied within minutes. Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. Name the time and place. We met for coffee at a spot halfway between my new studio and his apartment. He was early. Again. I took the afternoon off, he said casually. No edit bay, no calls, just time. That might not sound like much, but coming from Alex, Mr. I'll be there in 15. Sorry, I forgot. It was huge. As we sat down, I pulled out a small manila envelope. Inside was a mock-up of the new book proposal. He opened it carefully, like it was a museum exhibit. I can't believe this all came from your little cottage studio, he said, eyes scanning the watercolor sketches. It didn't come from the walls, I said. It came from the fact that I was finally allowed to fill a space without being questioned. He nodded slowly. I'm starting to realize that love isn't just about showing up with flowers or saying the right things. It's about protecting the space where the other person can thrive and not stepping all over it. That made me pause, because it was true. And it was also new. This version of him wasn't just rehearsed. He'd been listening. I took a breath and said what had been sitting on my chest for weeks. I'm open to exploring this again, but only if we take it slow, like really slow. I need my studio. I need my quiet. I need to never again feel like I'm asking for too much when I say no. He didn't flinch. Then that's exactly how we'll do it, he said. And then he pulled out something from his backpack, a hardcover copy of The Little Prince, worn but intact. This used to sit on our bookshelf, he said. You once said this was the book that made you want to draw for children. I blinked, surprised. I didn't even know you remembered that. He smiled, a little shy. I didn't, until I moved out and started unpacking my boxes. I found this and thought, if she ever lets me back into her world, I'll return it as a reminder. I do remember. I just forgot to act like it. I traced the cover with my thumb. The fox, the stars, the boy with golden hair. It's a good start, I said softly. He nodded, standing up and placing the book carefully on the table between us. 1 page at a time? He asked. 1 page at a time, I replied. That night, I walked home feeling balanced, not swept up, not carried away, but grounded. He wasn't back in my life, not fully, but he was knocking, gently. And for now, that was enough, because I had built a door, and this time I held the key. Things were steady. For the first time in months, I felt like I was walking beside someone instead of behind them. Alex and I weren't officially back together. We still lived apart. We still had our own schedules, but we met up once a week. Coffee, long walks, sometimes just sitting in the park with no agenda, no pressure, no labels, just two people seeing if they could meet again, as who they are now. Then came the weekend that tested everything. I had been invited to a local art market, my first public booth, a chance to showcase prints, stickers, and signed copies of my books. It wasn't a huge event, but it felt huge to me. Alex offered to help. I'll be your assistant, he joked. I'll carry boxes, handle awkward customers, refill your coffee. I hesitated. He noticed. I get it, he said. You're not sure if you can trust me with your space again. I nodded. It's not personal, it's sacred. He smiled, no ego in sight. Then let me earn my way in. So we agreed. He'd swing by halfway through the event. No pressure, no responsibilities, just presence. The morning of the market, I arrived early. My booth was under a yellow tent near the entrance, bright and cheerful just how I wanted it, As I set up my table, hedgehog prints, bunny bookmarks, raccoon mugs, I caught people stopping to smile. A child pointed at one of my prints and squealed, "Mommy, look, the giraffe with the cookies!" It filled me with something so rare, so earned, validation without conditions. No one here cared who I was dating. They just saw what I had made with my two hands. By noon, the table was buzzing. I barely had time to breathe. And then I looked up. And there he was. Alex, holding a large iced tea, my favorite, and wearing a simple black shirt with the words, "Support your local artists," printed across the front. "You're early," I said, surprised. He shrugged. "Couldn't stay away." I smiled. "I could use a sandwich run if you're up for it." He saluted. "Ma'am, yes ma'am." An hour later, disaster struck. The wind picked up. A gust caught the edge of my banner, then the prints, sending several flying across the sidewalk like paper kites. I gasped, scrambling to catch them. Before I could reach them, a little boy ran straight toward the street, chasing one of the raccoon bookmarks. "Jacob!" his mom screamed. Without hesitation, Alex dropped everything, bolted across the crosswalk, and scooped the child back to the curb just as a bike whizzed by. The whole scene lasted 10 seconds, but for me, it moved in slow motion. He didn't look to me for praise. He didn't announce what he'd done. He simply crouched down beside the child, handed him the bookmark, and said, "This guy's too cool to be roadkill, don't you think?" The kid laughed. The mom burst into tears. I just stood there, watching. Not because he was heroic, but because for the first time, he didn't need an audience to be present. Later, when things calmed down, I handed him a folded thank you card I'd drawn that morning, just in case. Inside, I'd written, "I don't need you to save the day. I need you to protect the days I've built for myself." He read it slowly, then folded it carefully, almost reverently. "I want that too," he said, "every single day." I didn't answer right away, because I had learned that love wasn't a lightning strike. It was a steady fire, and the only way to know if it would last was to stop shielding it from the wind and see if it still burned. That night, back in my studio, I lit a small candle and sat at my desk. I didn't feel like someone being courted. I felt like someone finally being seen, not for what I gave, but for who I was when I stopped giving everything away. 3 months. That's how long it had been since I walked out of the studio I once shared with Alex, carrying nothing but a small white box, a quiet rage, and a key to the life I hadn't yet imagined. Now, as I stood in the doorway of that same old apartment, once again invited, not entitled, everything felt still, not heavy, not painful, just settled. Alex opened the door, slightly flushed from cleaning. The place looked different, not in its layout, but in its energy. There were no piles of laundry that weren't his, no spare toothbrush in the holder that wasn't mine, no misplaced art prints that had once been borrowed without asking. Just a tidy space, and a man who had finally decided that peace was worth protecting, not just possessing. "Hey," he said softly, offering a small smile. I stepped inside. It smelled like bergamot and old pine floors. It smelled like memory, and like something new, too. We had agreed to meet here, not to move back in, not to rekindle something blindly, but to talk about what's next. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, both with coffee mugs in hand, both waiting for the other to break the silence. "I've been thinking a lot," Alex finally said. "Not about how to get you back, but about whether the version of me you deserve is sustainable when no one's watching." That made me look up. "I don't need grand gestures anymore," I said, "or promises written in panic. I need consistency. I need boundaries honored without reminders. I need space that feels like ours, not one I have to negotiate for." He nodded. "I know. And honestly, I'm still learning. Still failing sometimes, but I've also started seeing those failures as part of the work, not the end of it." We sipped in silence again, the kind of silence that doesn't sting, the kind that lets things breathe. "I'm not here to ask you to move back in," he said after a while. But I am here to ask if you'd consider letting me build something new with you. New how? I asked. His eyes didn't waver. You keep your studio. I keep mine. We keep our independence. But we build a third space, figuratively or literally, for us. One with rules we create together. And no one else gets a key unless we both agree. I felt something shift inside me. Not fireworks, not fear, just a steady maybe. Later that afternoon, we walked to my studio. It was the first time he'd seen it in full bloom. The open floor plan, the skylight, the print wall, the tiny reading corner with a sign above it. This space is sacred. He stood in the doorway for a long time before entering, like someone entering a chapel or a second chance. He didn't touch anything, didn't sit until I said it was okay, didn't offer unsolicited suggestions. He simply looked and then whispered, almost to himself, "You really built a home out of your voice." I turned to him. "It's not just my home, it's me." He nodded. "And I promise I won't try to redecorate her this time." That night, as the city hummed quietly outside the window, I opened a blank page in my sketchbook. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know what I wanted to draw. A couple holding hands under stars, a woman walking alone through a meadow, a fox who had finally built her own den. Instead, I just wrote a line. You can forgive the past and still protect your future. And underneath it, and sometimes, loving yourself means letting someone else try again, with limits, with lessons, and with the door half open. Did we get back together? Not in the way people expect. There was no ring, no announcement, no Instagram post, just a calendar invite on both our phones that read, "Every Sunday, us time." Some Sundays were quiet walks, some were therapy sessions, some were full of laughter, and some were hard conversations. But all of them were intentional. And that made all the difference, because I didn't need saving anymore. I had already done that for myself, but I was open to building something. This time, not out of obligation or fear, but out of choice. Sometimes the strongest love story isn't the one where they never break apart. It's the one where they do, and then choose, over and over again, not to repeat the same mistakes. One boundary at a time, one honest word at a time, and Sunday at a time.